This bizarre museum is strangely popular, but do you know what goes on inside? Hidden from the public eye lie eerie specimens and fascinating discoveries. From fish that are see-through to strange snakes and bat skulls, this museum holds nearly any animal you can think of. In this video, we will look at every aspect of this huge collection, from acquisition to preservation, and even some of the most interesting specimens kept here. Stay tuned till the end, and let's dig in. One of the largest museums in the world, located in the Chicago, Illinois, stands towering a museum so massive and immersive that it attracts up to 2 million people every year. Known as the Field Museum, or the Field Museum of Natural History, it is one of the largest natural history museums in the whole world. The museum hosts a collection of more than 24 million objects in its historic collection that makes it one of the country's greatest museums. Apart from the legendary artifacts, the museum is focused on taking you on a tour to explore history dating back to 4.6 billion years ago. It is the 11th most visited museum in the world, and you will know shortly why it is so famous. 11 million animal specimens. Tucked away in the basement, the Field Museum of Chicago, in reality, hosts around 40 million specimens, but only 1% of them are on display. Just imagine. Among the massive collection lies another set of species that are kept well hidden in the labs of the museum. A whopping number of 11 million specimens are put inside huge jars and giant bathtubs for the scientists to poke and prod on. Mainly for research purposes, the area is not even open for visitors, but we have found a way to show you what goes on inside the secret basement, where there is a whole zoo of these preserved species. In the basement, you will find a lot of troubling things that will send shivers down your spine. Call it what you want, the house of the dead or a biological capsule. It does not change the fact that this basement is there and home to some of the wildest species. Spider-tailed horned viper. There is a special jar inside the lab that makes you wonder about the importance of the work this museum is dedicated to doing. A locked jar holds a very special guest inside, an old specimen from the 1960s, which had kept the scientists puzzled for decades. Back then, the experts thought it was kind of a viper that had an abnormality, a kind of cancer or a parasite infection. But then, in the 2000s, the scientists discovered something pretty bizarre about the same specimen. The viper was actually a whole other species, and the discovery was only made because another viper was found of the same species. Crazy, isn't it? But this is why the organization is so necessary. The specimens are kept with the exact dates they were collected by the lab, so the scientists can cross-reference them and make wonderful new discoveries like this. Catfish. There are some large animals inside the lab that can be a bit tricky to deal with. A slight shift in the measurements, and you could end up losing that specimen. Take the catfish, for example. The scientists have to measure the exact amount of formalin that needs to go to preserve the catfish, because if the scientists go a notch higher, the fish bloats and decays. Similarly, if they end up giving slightly less than the required amount, the fish will get floppy and get all dismembered, ruining its intact shape. The hard part is that there is no standard measurement. The scientists have to guess it by touching the specimen and applying their expertise to it. This catfish will then get soaked in a bath of formalin for about a week with cheesecloth on top for better preservation. Frogs. There are about 883 frogs stored in the lab. These prisoner frogs are tagged with different identification numbers so the scientists know which one to fish for in the tank of formalin. As you can guess, there isn't a lot of space with so many species in the same building. So, a lot of them have to be stacked over one another in large jars to give room to the other species of frogs. Here is the funny thing. They are not all from the same era. Some of them were brought here 10 years ago, while others were given by a collector about a few months ago. So, they are all not from the same time frame. The oldest specimen in this department came in the 19th century in 1838. Komodo dragon. There are also creepy tubs in the basement that hold something quite frightening. Filled with alcohol, these tubs are there to preserve the large Komodo dragons. There are only 2 of these specimens at the lab right now, but the 6-foot-long animal is best preserved if kept in an open tub. Since the Komodo dragon is not enclosed in a jar, extra efforts are needed to ensure that there are no harmful contaminants taking a dip in the alcohol bath. The tough part about the Komodo dragons is the fact that it takes weeks to prepare the specimen. Alien fishes. There are a bunch of glowing fishes, unlike anything you have ever seen before in the museum too. What these scientists are doing to study the fishes is super fascinating. There are many fish with small bones and skeletons, but there is one problem. It is quite hard to isolate the skeleton without breaking it apart to study the bones. So, scientists came up with a way that can help them see the bones under the microscope without stripping away the tissue. Here is how it goes. First, the fish are dyed a blue color. This specific dye can cling to the bones since it can bind with the calcium. A few days later, the time comes to make the fish see through. An enzyme is used that can digest the protein but leaves collagen that binds the fish together. The fish is seen through now, but the job is not done yet. It is now time to make the bones glow. The fish is put into a red dye that may take days or even a month to lock in, but as an astonishing result, a transparent fish with a colored skeleton pops up in a magnificent display. There are not just these glowy skeletons that are present at the lab. Some of them are clear specimens, but when the scientists need to study bones, they pop one of these out of the jars. Now you might ask if it really has helped? Well, turns out they have helped a lot. For instance, there were 2 species of fish that looked quite identical from the outside. But when the fishes were put in the dye, it was found that they had different skeletons. Quite amusing, isn't it? There is also a tank filled with electric eels. But the interesting part is that they are not actually eels, but knife fish. Regardless, they would have shocked you. There is also a lancet fish that was preserved and became dull in its appearance. So preservation might not tick all the boxes. The insect drawer. Imagine opening a drawer and finding hundreds of cockroaches neatly stacked in small boxes. While that sight may scare you, it is not what the researchers fear. This is their way of keeping the insects organized so they can study them later. There are about 12 million insects stacked in the museum. Out of that massive number, 4 million are placed in cabinets and drawers, while the other 8 million are preserved in alcohol. From cabinets with tens of drawers of insects to slides of the different species for better study, this lab is a haven for scientists wanting to do research. The level of organization is insane, and the Field Museum has managed to attain it in the best way. From cockroaches to beetles and mites to rove beetles, the collection is crazy. Of the rove beetles, the lab has over 7,000 different specimens. That huge number is simply crazy to just think about and gives a glimpse into the vast world of animal life and diversity that surrounds us. Similarly, for cockroaches, there are hundreds of species stored here, from exotic types to regular ones roaming in your home. This collection is super important for studying because cockroaches are one of the most resilient creatures alive. People claim that they might even survive a zombie apocalypse. While that may be unclear right now, scientists are working hard to separate facts from fiction. But here is what's really interesting. The scientists are working on a system to put barcodes on all of these specimens. So, if a person tries to access one online, they can get all the information they need without coming to the lab, making it 10 times easier for scientists to make new discoveries. Animal mummies. Many people don't know this, but the Field Museum actually houses a lot of mummies. Yeah, you heard that right. The animal mummies gained quite the popularity in the later years of Egyptian civilization. These mummies were used as offerings, but were then unearthed by the scientists for research. But the interesting part was that the mummies were not what the crowd expected. Let's just say they were not all real. Some of them were fakes with heavy bandages wrapped around to resemble a cat. But when you peeked inside, the scientists found that it had nothing more than a few bones, sand, and leather. Not all of the animal mummies were like this, though, and the CT scan allowed the researchers to confirm their suspicion. They found a mummy wrapped in an odd shape, had an actual cat inside. But it was not as shocking as this crocodile mummy. This mummy was made to look like a baby crocodile. All the scientists thought it was an empty mummy like the fake ones, but the CT scan opposed their theory. Inside was a baby Nile crocodile that had just hatched out of an egg. The people of the old Egypt stabbed it and immediately wrapped it under bandages for the offering. Creepy, right? But why are these specimens preserved? The whole basement is actually like a library of animals that can help the researchers learn more about the life of an animal. They can compare the older species with the newer ones and see how the animals have drastically evolved over time. The preservation process of the specimens. Before we talk about the preservation process, let's look at how these scientists even get the millions of species and stack them inside the museum. Well, some of these specimens are obtained through donations, but others have to be fished out from their natural habitat. The scientists go on expeditions to hunt down the animals that they need for research and then strategically euthanize them. This helps them build a massive library of animals that they can stack in jars and study. After the acquisition of the specimens comes the tricky part, the preservation, and trust me when I say this, that it is no easy feat. First, the DNA is extracted from the animals, expertly taken to ensure that the sample remains pure. Once the DNA is out, it is put inside the liquid nitrogen freezers alongside the DNA of other animals. Imagine opening that freezer. It must give an eerie feeling. Then comes the formalin treatment. This is the special part where the animals are frozen in time, giving rise to their biological capsules. The treatment ensures that they stay in the best shape for the scientists to study. Once the specimens are frozen, they are to be kept in that form for a long, long time. To do this, they are put inside an alcohol bath. This helps the animal keep its shape without many changes to its anatomy. It is also less toxic and safer to handle for the scientist. Now, here is an interesting tidbit. Some of the larger animals, when dipped in the alcohol bath, may release an odd color. This is actually debris and oils that are released by the specimen. They may change the color of the animal, but it does not affect the preservation process in any way. Can you imagine going through the same exhaustive process for 11 million such specimens? The truth is somewhat shocking yet fascinating. Although the scientists bring the new specimens while studying the old, there are many jars that catch dust over the years. Not all specimens are taken out and studied every day. Some of them have been left on the shelves for years. That is, until a light bulb goes off in the head of a scientist, and the jar that was tucked away for months is cracked open for a new discussion. Plus, managing the extensive collection of these wet animals is no easy task. You have to organize the collection and maintain every specimen in the collection. A report said that there were 883 specimens of only frogs in this hidden basement. Imagine analyzing each one and cataloging them. Some of the specimens have to share a home. A visitor saw 10 water snakes, all stacked over one another and placed inside a single jar. But the researchers believe it is worth the struggle. Apart from new discoveries, the itching curiosity of these scientists can help bring in new facts to the field, helping us learn more about biodiversity and evolution, the preservation process at other museums. The interesting part is that the Field Museum is not the only one to hold a lab for preserving animals and doing research. There are other big names like the Smithsonian Museum, which has one of the largest collections of specimens in the world. With over 147 million specimens, other museums do not even come close to the Smithsonian's collection. There are more than 300,000 specimens coming in a single year alone. You will find a crazy set of animals stacked up neatly at the museum. From tiny butterflies to giant dinosaur bones, the scientists keep all of them hidden in a lab. Only about 1% of the collection is up on display, while the other specimens rest far from the public eye. There is a whole list of specimens that are either donated or are hand-picked by scientists in the field. Some are gifted by popular collectors or personalities to the museums. A unique collection of specimens that is often left ignored in other museums are the specimens of birds. Experts at the Smithsonian's believe that most scientists stopped exploring these specimens a long time ago, but they were not about to make the same mistake. The Smithsonian Museum has one of the oldest collections of bird specimens, with bird samples coming all the way from 1904. Today, they have a much larger collection of birds, with more parts of their bodies up for studying, summing up to more than 500,000 bird samples. From something as fascinating as wing spreads and song voices to the more common skeletons and tissues, the museum has a storage system for all the birds. But that's not all the birds this museum holds. Scientists here also study bird samples that caused an airplane crash. You'd be surprised at how many samples come in the museum's mail. The idea is to help the experts gather adequate research to develop airplanes that can then withstand these unwanted strikes. Talking about storage, the preservation process of the Smithsonian's is a bit different from the Field Museum. There is a lot more effort put into the cleaning of the specimens and their preservation. The recently dead animals come in to be kept in the storage chambers. Most are eaten by beetles for cleaning. This leaves only the skeleton, which can then be stored. But what about dinosaurs? Well, dinosaur bones have a lot of dead rock and are compressed over the fossils that are handled with a light brush. A storage box that costs over $800 is designed for custom usage of different dinosaur bones. A single bone is kept in a single box to help best preserve its shape and to protect it from disfiguring. There is no room for pests to infect the bones thanks to these durable boxes. The sad part is that the external damage to these specimens is being done by another character in the story: the flooding and heavy rainfall. Experts estimate that they have sustained over millions of worth of damage on the specimens, which will take no less than $1 billion to repair. To counter this unseen battle, the specimens are being sent to another location of the museum, which is far from the sea. The best part about preserving these specimens is the scientists' efforts in creating digital scans. This way, even if the original gets destroyed from an unforeseen incident, scientists have a digital copy to work with. It is a last fail-safe. The process may be tiring, but it is well worth the effort. Around 9 million species have been restored this way, with thousands more to follow suit. Through this effective way of putting the entire catalog online, the experts hope to give access to more than 12,000 scientists visiting through the internet. And with that, it is time to say goodbye. From the interesting stories woven through many specimens to the storage techniques employed at different museums, there is so much that goes on behind the curtains at museums. Which part was your favorite? Let us know in the comments below. If you have had the luck to see one of these hidden collections in the past, do share something fascinating you encountered on your trip. We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments section. If you enjoyed the video, press the like button and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We will be coming up with more exciting videos for you soon. Until then, goodbye and thanks for watching.